Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and author of the newly released book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. I encourage you to go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, any of the websites, any of the stores, in all stores being carried right now. Get your copy in time for, as you come in and out of your turkey coma, you can enjoy a great read. We're meeting this morning with Becky Baudouin, Baudouin.
Yes.
Becky Baudouin, author of Cancer, Faith, and Unexpected Joy, What My Mother Taught Me About How to Live and How to Die. Becky, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Becky, it's interesting that you are sharing a journey with us, a very personal journey, the loss of your mom to lung cancer and the lessons that she taught you during this time. I want to go back in time to the early days of mom raising Becky and some of the lessons the mom implanted in Becky as you were growing up that would even encourage you or engage you or give you a desire to take this journey with your mom. Were you an only child?
No, there's 5 kids in my family. I'm the second to the youngest. So my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she would tell us that her highest calling in life was being a mom. She was very fulfilled doing that. She did a lot of things that I don't do, like gardening and just a whole lot of home type things that she did. She was a great example to me of what it looked like to live in community with other women. She hosted Bible studies and prayer groups at our home. Her friends would stop over unexpected and just sit at the kitchen table with her, and they would talk about life and their struggles, and the kids would play. She was a hard worker. And she really was the person for me who taught me about God, I think more than anybody else. She gave her life to Christ when I was a year old. So from that point on, he really was central to who she was and everything she did, her faith in Christ. So she really passed that heritage on to me as well, and also my siblings.
You know, I don't think people really realize what an exciting time that would be. Is here she's 1 year into the Lord, probably at the pinnacle. She's on the surfboard, she's riding the waves, she's excited, engaged, and you get to bear witness to her maturing in faith as a very young believer. But as you grew, you began to watch a metamorphosis into from a very exuberant, on fire, to steady and faithful and resolute in the Word, which was a great model for you as far as building a faith journey for you.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely got to see her lifelong faith journey, because she was very steadfast in her faith, and I saw her really enjoy her faith with her friends and enjoy her relationship with the Lord. And then I saw her faith be an anchor for her during difficult times. We had some difficult things that we went through in our family, and she ended up going through a divorce, and she experienced a lot of painful seasons in her life, but I saw her faith really be an anchor for her during those times.
You know, it's beautiful that you're reflecting on this through a lens of your mom, but the difficult times were impactful to you as well.
Right.
And so it wasn't just that your mom got a divorce, your dad was no longer there in the home, and there's 5 children, and there's your mom of faith who's dealing with all of the logistics and all of the other aspects of raising now as a single mom 5 children. What's going on with you during this time as far as your faith journey and as far as your understanding of what's happening with mom and dad, and how does that bleed over to you?
Well, They actually got divorced when I was in college. So by that time, my sister was really the only one that was at home. But I can tell you that all the time I was growing up, I knew that their relationship was a difficult one. I knew that they struggled. And I always had a fear as a child that they would get divorced. I remember asking my mom that when I was probably 5 years old, asking her if they were going to get divorced. So I grew up with that fear of just my family falling apart. I kind of lived on that edge of insecurity, feeling afraid that that would happen. When I was in high school, I actually went off to Bible camp and I got a job one summer because things at home were so tense and I really wanted just to get away, you know? And it was at that camp, I was working in the kitchen, and then we would go over and hear the youth pastor at youth camp. And it was really during that summer that my faith, I really adopted a faith of my own. You know, I had learned about God my whole life, but I was heartbroken at camp that summer. I was really, really scared that my parents were not going to make it. And I needed hope for my own life, you know, thinking about my future. I want to get married someday. I don't know what it looks like to have a marriage that will go the distance and that's healthy. And I just felt that that summer I really came to know who Jesus was, and it changed my life. I read through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in just 5 weeks, and it just completely transformed my life.
Did you see this as God always preparing you, always giving you a longing for something that was more stable, more incorruptible, more fixed and firm, and gave you this uncertainty even as a young child that it wasn't going to be in the stability of mom and dad, that there was going to be an uneasiness until you found what it was that God wanted you to grab a hold of, which is the same message for all of us. He just uses all these different circumstances to get us there. Did you find that the fear of, or the consuming fear of the family falling apart was no longer as dark and looming, almost a presence of darkness in this whole marital relationship between your mom and dad? You now had grabbed a hold of a promise and a light and something that was so much stronger that that's what became the sustenance for you as opposed to the fear.
Okay, I can hear you again.
Good. I don't know, were you
Okay.
able to hear that last question?
No, can you repeat it, please?
Yes. You say you came to faith at working at the summer camp and really grabbed a hold and read through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in 5 weeks. You had gone through from age 5 till 18 asking the question, is their marriage going to last? Are they going to get divorced? And then all of a sudden, about the time that they're about to get divorced and it's going to fall apart, God grabs a hold of you and you grab a hold of God, and the timing seems quite perfectly orchestrated that when you needed the rock was there, and it gave you the firm foundation you needed in order to sustain and even thrive through what would be a very challenging time.
Yeah, I think I definitely was ready that summer to enter into a real intimate relationship with the Lord. I didn't know that's what I was doing because I really just wanted to get away from home and kind of go off and have an experience. But God really had a plan for me. And I just, when I look back on that, I think it was the perfect timing for me to really get to know Christ. And even in that, though, I think there was still some misconceptions I had. You know, I really was black and white in my thinking and thought, well, you know, I really believe God has a good plan for me. So I just need to make sure I find a Christian man who shares the same values I do. And we're going to be one of those good families who has, you know, everything together, and we will have the life that I've always wanted. And I've been married for 23 years, and God has been very faithful to us in our marriage, but it's not it's not an all or nothing kind of thing. You know, there's struggle. I think a good Christian marriage definitely involves some struggle and a lot of growing up on both of our parts, and God has been faithful to us in that. But I definitely, at 16 years old, I felt very hopeful that I had a future ahead of me, and I knew that God was going to help me through whatever happened with my family. And I just never turned back after that point. I just knew that I needed to walk with God and that He would help me through the challenges that I would face.
You know, you're dealing with coming into your fullness as a young woman. You're struggling for your own identity. You referred in your background to dealing with a speech impediment, with stuttering. So
Yeah.
that had a lot to do with self-image and acceptance, rejection, fitting in, identity. You have this struggle with mom and dad not being something that you could hold on to. I'm sure that there was a great deal of uncertainty going on in your life through those formative years.
Hmm.
Do you think that that was one of the reasons why you so passionately embraced God's plan for your life?
Yes, I think that the fear that I knew as a child was really great. You know, I had a lot of anxiety, the fear that my parents would get divorced. I did have a stuttering problem that began when I was 8 or 9 years old, which is kind of unusual. That's a little bit old for a child to start stuttering. I didn't even know I was doing it. So the school intervened and basically told me that I had this problem, but I didn't even know it. So those words kind of, you know, began to change me as I took on that defect, you know, and so I just had a lot of anxiety as a child. And the other thing I was really afraid of is that my mom would get cancer because she smoked, and I was so scared that she would end up with cancer, you know, at some point. So that fear, those fears that I had really just kind of ruled my life. I made decisions based on my fear. I said no to a lot of things because of my fear. My speech problem really impacted me a lot, and I basically withdrew, and I tried to avoid speaking as much as possible because of the fear that I felt. But I think in all of these areas where I've had so much fear, what I have really come to see is the perfect love of God is what drives out fear. That's what First John tells us, First John 4:18. And I think I experienced the love of God mostly as a child through my mom. She really gave me that unconditional love and acceptance, and she was really a safe place for me. School was really hard, but I would come home after school and she just let me be myself, and she didn't pressure me, and she was very loving. And then you know, throughout high school and college and into my early adulthood, as I have opened myself up to God's perfect love, I have seen my fears be just kind of pushed out, you know, and that's really been where I have found freedom from a lot of my fears. But my mom being diagnosed with cancer was the big fear that I had had my whole life. And then it happened, and it was just, you know, it was devastating.
It's hard to even imagine hearing those words, especially when it's tied to such an engaging fear.
Hmm.
What was the relationship like with your siblings? You know, you had this great one-on-one relationship with your mom, but there's four others. How did
Right.
they interact, and how did you interact with them?
Well, each of my relationships is different with my siblings. I have two sisters and two brothers. Um, and you know, they're all special to me in different ways. I would say that being the second to youngest, my youngest sister and I kind of being left at home by ourselves when I was in high school and she was in middle school. I think I have more memories with her because I can remember more of just the two of us. But it was it was a loud, chaotic family that we had, and you know, we've all had different struggles based on our experiences and the different things that happen in our family. And but it's something that I try as an adult just to embrace what I have and to build those relationships the best that I can.
As you watched your mom as a smoker, and as you watched all this come to pass, you talk in the book about the setting of Thanksgiving, family gathering, birth of a baby, and all tied into this family gathering comes a diagnosis. Take us to that point.
Well, it was 5 years ago, and the week before Thanksgiving, we were in Michigan visiting my younger sister. She was having her fifth baby, and we were there for the birth of her baby. You know, we had gone. I was there in the delivery room when my niece was born, and that day was just a day I will never forget. It was such an honor and a privilege to be there. And coming home after that, my husband and I were then staying with the other children. We were excited to do Thanksgiving at their home and welcome my sister and her baby home. But my mom hadn't traveled to be there because she wasn't feeling well. And later that afternoon, the same day my niece was born, I get a call from my mom saying that she had gone to the emergency room because she felt shortness of breath and they thought something was wrong with her heart. My older sister, who lived near her, had taken her, and they did an x-ray, and she just said, he thinks I have lung cancer. And, you know, I'm listening on the phone, and as soon as she said it, I just thought, I can't believe that now this is happening. Because she had quit smoking many years before. I had kind of held my breath for the first 5 years because I always heard after that your lungs kind of, you know, get healthier and the risk goes down.
Right.
So it really was not something that was on my radar. I was not expecting it at that point. But it just, there it was, you know, this big fear I'd had my whole life. And I thought, now it's happening. And it's just, it was just absolutely devastating.
When you heard the words that you had so long feared, take me to that moment of, was it the Job kind of moment that said, that which I feared the most has come to pass, I was right all along, or, oh no, my mom is going to die, or what were the first thoughts that were grabbing a hold of you?
I think for me, when my mom said those words, we didn't know exactly, you know, what it was. He thought she had cancer. That's what we knew. And I did my best to comfort her. We cried on the phone together. We prayed together. And I said, you know, a doctor can't officially diagnose you with cancer by an x-ray. You got to have more tests done. I tried to just say, hold on a second, we got to get more information. But I think deep in my heart, I just thought my mom was going to die. This is happening, you know? And again, when I went to bed that night, I mean, I did feel just a fear come over me. This time it was just the fear of losing my mom. What is that going to be like? And what is this road going to look like that we have to walk through? You know, I was so afraid of losing her and what life would look like without her. But I was equally as afraid of just what it was going to look like. I didn't want to see her suffer. I imagined it would be just unbearable to watch my mom go through this. So that night was hard. It was, you know, it was very hard. But once again, I just turned to the only person I knew to turn to, and that was to God, because I believed that he would get us through this difficult time.
So you have fear and faith warring inside of you in this dread and emotion, but yet there's something telling you that God is still there.
Right.
How did Thanksgiving go that year?
Well, it was just my husband and I and our children and my sister and her family. And I don't remember. I mean, I know I cooked the dinner. I know we did the dinner, but I think we were just in shock and just I really don't even remember. I don't even remember sitting down at the table and eating the food. It just was, we went through the motions, but my sister and I were terrified. And then Christmas, by the time Christmas came around, there had been more tests done. We knew what we were looking at. The doctor had given my mom her official diagnosis and prognosis, and it was not good. He told her that her cancer was inoperable and it was incurable. And with treatment, she could maybe have some more time with her family. Without treatment, he said maybe 3 months she would be gone. So my mom decided to do treatment. But then the doctor in that appointment, he asked my mom, "Are you a person of faith?" And the fact that he asked that question, I just think he was looking to see if there was an opening, right? If the patient was going to say yes or no. And my mom said, "Oh, yes, I'm a person of faith. I have great faith in God, and I believe in the power of prayer." And I think he could sense that my mom was, she was a woman of faith, and she was believing that God was going to heal her. I think he could sense that. But what he said kind of steered, I think, the whole journey in a little bit of a different direction. He said, "Well, if you read even a little bit of scripture, you will find that God tells us that in this world we will have trouble. We will have trouble. But he promises to never leave us or forsake us. And he tells us he will walk with us through it all, and he will help us. And ultimately, we have the promise of heaven after this life is over." And he spoke those words to my mom, and it was exactly what we needed to hear, because he was being realistic. He's a doctor. He sees this kind of thing all the time. He has a hard job of telling people the truth about their test results. And he was very honest about that. He didn't give any false hope for a cure in this life. He acknowledged God and his power, and that God can do anything, and he can do miracles. But he gave my mom a hope and us a hope that we really needed, which went beyond seeing the outcome that we wanted in this life. Even if what we are praying for doesn't happen, this is what the Bible says, that God promises to be with us. And that really set the tone, I think, for my mom and the way that she walked through her illness. It was such a gift.
We've been talking with Becky Baudouin, author of Cancer, Faith, and Unexpected Joy, What My Mother Taught Me About How to Live and How to Die. In your book, you quote these words from your mother: "I've taught you how to live. Now I want to teach you how to die. You don't have to be afraid." We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to go right to those words and take a journey with Becky on the remaining months of her mom's life as she tells us and describes the joy, the sadness, the fear, the faith, the comfort, the struggle, and the hope she faced as she walked with her mom hand in hand until her last breath. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we... Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Becky Baudouin, author of Cancer, Faith, and Unexpected Joy, What My Mother Taught Me About How to Live and How to Die. Becky, when we went to break, we talked about these words your mom spoke to you and to your siblings. I've taught you how to live, now I want to teach you how to die. You don't have to be afraid. Mm-hmm. Your mom had been diagnosed with inoperable lung cancer, and after months of treatment, there was no longer hope for a longer life. There was, however, hope for an everlasting life. When this Thanksgiving gathering, you get this news, you then go through the process of further diagnosis and testing, PET scans and MRIs and CAT scans and all the things that they do, and they plot out a course of treatment. What was that process like, and where were these lessons, how were they imparted? Because, you know, we kind of see this description and we say, oh, this must have been a bedtime chat or a bedside chat where you sat by her side hour after hour as she imparted to you. But it really wasn't like that at all, was it?
It was much more of a journey, you know, throughout the entire process. For Christmas, we all gathered at our home outside of Chicago, and we didn't say it out loud, but I think most of us were thinking this maybe will be our last Christmas with our mom. Um, so we tried really hard just to not just go through the motions, but to really think about what do we want this holiday to look like. We went to church together. We took communion together as a family, which was beautiful. And, my mom just absorbed all of it. She said it was the best Christmas that she had ever had. And as we went into that new year, she began chemo treatments, radiation treatments, and I saw my mom just go deeper in her faith with each day, really. She started off, I think, very positive. I'm going to, be around for a long time. The Lord is going to heal me. He's going to do a miracle. And we were all praying for that. And, but at a certain point, I remember being really just relieved and filled with peace when my mom told me, either way, the way that I look at it, I'm in a win-win situation here. If the Lord does heal me, then I win more time with my family. And that's what she wanted. She was very honest about that. She didn't want to leave. But she said, if I die, then I win eternity with my Savior. So either way, I win. And when I heard her say that, there was something that had shifted there. I think sometimes we don't want to even entertain the idea or the possibility that things are not going to go the way we're hoping, that our prayers are not going to be answered the way we want them to be answered. So we just stay in that place of everything's going to be okay. Everything is going to turn out the way we want. And it gives us, I think what it does is it limits our ability to really experience God's peace in the most profound way. And my mom was really opening up to that as she kind of opened herself up to both of those possibilities. Whether I am healed or whether I die, God ultimately is answering our prayers. He's taking care of me. And either way, I win and I'm safe with him. So that was remarkable. And then what you talked about there when she said, I've taught you how to live, now I want to teach you how to die. That was actually in the hospital just a couple days before she died. So that was really at the end of watching her walk this journey. And I saw her repeatedly trusting God and just surrendering to what was happening and what he was doing. And in the hospital, she had said, God is making everything clear to me. And I know that I'm dying. I know that I'm not going to get better. And my sister and I were with her and we said, you've taught us so much about how to live. And she said, I've taught you how to live, and now I want to teach you how to die. And I want you to see that you don't have to be afraid. And it just blew us away because she didn't know how to die. She had never done it before, and she didn't know what it was going to look like or when it was going to happen. And I think that's where so much of our fear comes in, But she knew that God was going to be with her. And she was so confident of that she wanted us to be with her because she wanted us to see that we didn't have to be afraid.
Over what period of time from the treatment process to the final moments with her, how long a time are we speaking of?
About 7 months.
Okay. And in those 7 months, as you journaled, as you documented, all along the way, there were nuggets being shared with you from a faith perspective, from an encouragement perspective, and as the same for your brothers and sisters as they were there with her, they also had their own, but for you, there were lessons which you were learning from her about life. It was, in those last days, it was about death, but in the journey, it was still about life. What were some of the most memorable moments for you during that time?
Well, I think seeing the way that she loved people, I always knew that she loved people, and she was always opening up our home, opening up her heart to people, but seeing the way she interacted, even with nurses and doctors and hospital workers, or when we would go get treatments, the way she interacted with other patients, always looking to try to encourage somebody, connect with somebody, hear their story. One of the things I write about in the book also is she worked through some of her own shame because she knew that basically she had cancer because she had smoked for almost 50 years. And it was such an embarrassment to her that, she just couldn't believe that she had done that and that this was a direct consequence of that. And I really, as I prayed for her, I remember telling her, God doesn't want you carrying this burden of shame in addition to this illness that you're facing. He wants you to be free from it, and she was able to find freedom from that shame. And one night we were sitting at this, she was kind of in a rehab home after having a bad bout in the hospital. And we're talking, and I see she's looking at this man who's smoking, a few feet away from us, and she's distracted, and I'm trying to talk to her. She's not really listening. And then finally she says, Becky, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I need to go talk to that man. And she gets up and very carefully she walks and makes her way over to where he's sitting. And I'm thinking, oh my, she's going to confront him about his smoking. She's going to say something to him. And my husband, Bernie, was with me. We just sat there and watched. We couldn't hear what she was saying, but we could see the way this man was responding to her, right, kind of leaning in, very open. And then later, she called us over and asked us if we wanted to meet him, and we got to talk to him. But she shared her story. She found out what his story was. And the reason she was able to connect with him and talk to him is because she had been freed from her shame. I think our shame is what keeps us from wanting to tell our stories, from wanting to be vulnerable. We don't want people to see who we are and maybe what we've done or what's been done to us because we're maybe worried that they're not going to want to be around us or be our friend or whatever it might be. And she was free from that. And God ministered to this man through her because she was able just to reach out and to see people where they were at. And we watched her do that just repeatedly. She just sort of saw every situation she was in, I think, as an opportunity to connect with people and to just let God use her.
During this time, are you reminded of the fears that you had? Were you confronting the fears? Were you finding victory? Were you finding comfort? Were you finding that you saw God's hand leading, guiding, and directing through this process, that this encounter you had as a teenager was going to prepare you to take this journey side by side with your mom?
Well, I was experiencing my own journey of freedom, I think, along, before this happened, and then certainly watching my mom kind of walk through this nightmare. I know that this was also a fear of hers. So she was living out a fear that she obviously had her whole life as well, from having smoked for so long. I know that that was on her mind also. But I've been on this journey to finding freedom from my fears for the last probably 10, 15 years as a writer. And then I began speaking to groups about 7 or 8 years ago. And it's something I never thought I'd be able to do. But I started little by little just with the things I was writing about. I speak to MOPS, Mothers of Preschoolers, groups around the Chicago area. And seeing how God, just one step at a time, that's all we have to do is just take the next step. If I wouldn't have stepped out and started speaking to groups, there's probably no way I would be doing radio interviews right now, because that's about the scariest thing I could think of when I was younger, being on television or doing a radio interview. So I can really look back on my journey also and just see how step by step, as I just say yes, and I say, okay, God, where are you leading me? And I take that next step, how his love frees me from my fear. And I saw my mom do that throughout the course of her illness as she just took the next step. Today I'm going to get chemo. Lord, who do you want me to talk to today? Today, I see this man, and she followed those promptings to reach out and talk to someone. And by the time she was at the end, where she said that to us, I want you to see that you don't have to be afraid. I don't think I've ever seen her, certainly, or anybody, be so free from fear, because she just was so at peace with everything that was happening around her. all the people that were calling or coming to see her, she was able to say what she wanted to say to them. It was just amazing to see her living so free while she's hooked up to all these machines. And, she's just a couple days away from dying. And she's telling us, you don't have to be afraid. I'm not afraid. You don't have to be afraid.
As you're going through all this, you're also a caregiver to her.
Mm-hmm.
She's not confined for the entire 7 months to the hospital. She's home quite a bit of that time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
were you able to share those responsibilities with your siblings as far as caretaking?
Yes. With my two sisters, my brothers live further away and they weren't able to be near as much, but my two sisters and we worked together. We did the very best that we could. My oldest sister is the one who lived in town with her. So she really had more of the daily burden, I would say, of just the weight of, mom is sick. She needs to go back to the doctor. She needs medication. She needs, the needs that she had while juggling her full-time job and her life. And then my other sister and I, we took turns traveling. It was about a 3-hour drive for each of us. And we took turns traveling. And so I got the gift for me was that when I did go, and I went as often as I could, I was able to spend 3 or 4 days in a row with my mom, which was time that I knew I would always treasure. It's late at night and early in the morning and driving in the car and just spending time together. So that was a gift for me. But we really worked together as family to figure out how to help. And my mom needed to reach out to her friends as well and ask for help, because there's a lot of help that's needed when somebody is sick. She went to radiation every single day and needed somebody to take her. So several of her friends stepped in and they were happy to help. And I just think that's another thing she modeled well, was asking people to walk with her on her journey. It wasn't just me or my sisters. It was a whole group of people that she invited into this journey.
When you began thinking about writing the book, what was the message, the overarching message that you wanted to convey, that people reading this who are either dealing with fear in their own life, fear for themselves or fear for another,
Mm-hmm.
Facing a caregiving or life and death diagnosis, or just in general realizing that parents and grandparents around them are aging and that there are things that can happen, and we wake up every day and find that things have happened, there are surprises. What was your desire in crafting this message? What was the takeaway that you wanted your readers to have?
Well, I wanted to tell really two stories. I wanted to tell my mom's story because the more I shared her story, even just with people in my own life, people would say, you need to write about this. You need to tell this story, because I think death is such a scary thing, even as Christians. I think so many of us are afraid of what it's going to be like. And I have very good friends who have walked this road with their aging parents or people in their lives that have gotten sick. And I've seen so many times where families are just very, it's very hard for them to talk about the reality of what's happening. Everybody just tries to get through it. But the way that my mom was able to draw us in and just kind of be our teacher and our leader and say, this is how we're going to do it, and I want to teach you some things here, was remarkable. So I wanted to tell her story of faith, and I wanted to tell my story as the daughter, because my journey of grief, I just think is so, everybody goes through loss. Everybody will go through this, and really, we really shouldn't even try our losses. I think I write about this in the book also, just our tendency to, when we're grieving, to compare. I did this, if somebody had lost maybe somebody that I felt they weren't as close to as I was to my mom, I would sort of think, well, I don't know if you're going to really get my pain, right? And then I had a friend that was in the same grief group as me. He led a table. He lost his 20-year-old daughter. And I found myself feeling very uncomfortable when I would talk to him, because he would ask me how I was doing. And I just thought, we are not in the same category. You lost your daughter. I can't even imagine. And I said that to him one time. I said, I can't even imagine what you're going through. And he said, don't do that. Don't minimize your loss because you think that mine is worse. Both lost someone here who is irreplaceable, and it hurts so badly. And that to me was such a lesson, because when we lose somebody who's irreplaceable, that word means that nobody else can fill that place in our lives. So we have this pain, we have this loss and this grief that we are the only ones who know what that feels like. So I wanted to tell my grief story because I really believe in the power of sharing our stories, and I wanted it to be an experience much like what I experienced at a grief group, sitting around a table with other people who had walked through loss and being able to share in that together and share our sorrows and experience healing, because that I just think is the way that God loves to heal us, is through each other. So I wanted to also tell my story in the hopes that it would bring healing to people when they read it.
You bring up such an interesting point that I know that there's a lot of people out there that are not seeking grief counseling because they lost an aged parent. But the loss of a parent is the loss of a parent. I stated, my mother's 91 years old. She's healthy, she's vibrant, but how many more years do I have with her? I don't have 30. I don't have 40. I'm in my mid-60s. How many more years does my 28-year-old daughter have with me? She doesn't have 40. She doesn't have 50. So the depth of relationship determines the degree of grief. And if we have a superficial relationship and we hear of someone's passing, we feel sorry, but it passes. But the deeper the relationships are, the closer the relationships, the deeper the grief.
Right.
And this gentleman was right. You can't understand his pain. He can't understand your pain, but he can understand you're both in pain. And your grief is your own grief, and your grief needs to be dealt with. It's not a comparative. It's not on you go to the doctor, I hurt. Well, on point between 1 and 10, these are the 10 faces, point to your level of pain. You're either grieving or you're not grieving. You're either grieving or it's not a 1 to 10. Well, right now I'm at a level 10, but I'm hoping to move down the scale. Grieving is a process.
Right.
Your mom said to you, I've taught you how to live, now I want to teach you how to die. You don't have to be afraid. In those 3 days, what was she telling you about death? What was she telling you about how to die that she had not told you in her lessons on how to live?
Well, up until that point, we hadn't, when I was with her, I don't know what my siblings did when they were with her, but I asked her any question that I had. We talked about, I asked her, do you want an open casket or a closed casket? And what songs do you want at your funeral? And we talked about that, but I hadn't heard her talk about dying like that until she really knew that God was making it clear that she was in fact dying. And what I saw those last couple of days was her surrender. And it was a beautiful kind of surrender. It wasn't fighting. It wasn't saying, I refuse to die. I am not going to let this be the way that this happens. It was a surrender to God. Whatever your plan is, I surrender to it. And her posture and her attitude and all of it was really one of, God knows better than we do. And He's calling me home now, and I am ready to go, and I'm willing to go, and I want you guys to be here. I want you all to be here, And the morning that she died, the morning of the day that she died, she actually said, what a beautiful day that the Lord has made. And we all just kind of sat there stunned, and my brother-in-law got up and wrote it on her whiteboard in her room, and I just thought, that is how she sees this day. This day, is the one that God has made, and it's the day that she's going home. And to me, there was so much peace in those moments because my mom was at peace, you know. And she invited hospice to come in. She was absolutely wanting everything we possibly could do so that she could be comfortable, and hospice was wonderful. The nurses were so compassionate, and they gave such good care to her, and they helped our family. And it was very difficult. I mean, I'm not going to say that it was just the most wonderful day of my life. It was, in some way, it was the hardest day of my life to watch my mom die. It really was. But that surrender piece, I just think, was so incredibly powerful. And she had lived her life that way. She had lived her life the best that she could, every day surrendering to Jesus. And in death, she surrendered by saying, you know what? We had prayed for something different, but I surrender.
And in her case, surrender didn't mean giving up. It meant going up.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
She
And you
wa-
know, the moment that she died, I remember thinking, she really did it. It felt like it felt like she left willingly, you know? And I just thought, she really did it. I can't believe she just did it. She really just walked into eternity, you know? And it was so courageous to see that. It stunned me to see her do that.
Becky, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We've been talking with Becky Baudouin, author of Cancer, Faith, and Unexpected Joy, What My Mother Taught Me About How to Live and How to Die. There's many of you out there facing this same scenario, concerned with the same fears, the same worries about how will you handle this situation? What lessons are there that God wants you to learn? Through the eyes of one who's experienced this journey side by side with their mother over a course of 7 months, from a diagnosis of inoperable lung cancer to her passing on into eternity, into the loving hands of the Father. She takes you on a journey that's emotional, it's personal, it's transparent. It addresses the fears that every one of us has, but so few of us are willing to talk about. She does this for you so you don't have to. So I encourage you to read Cancer, Faith, and Unexpected Joy, What My Mother Taught Me About How to Live and How to Die by Becky Baudouin. Becky, thank you so much for being with us here on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you for having me.
God bless you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.